How many times have we found ourselves committed to learning new briefs so that we can add speed and subtract those extra strokes that are just slowing us down? We all know that brevity is the key to exponentially leveling up our Steno skills. And by the way, brace yourselves because this entire presentation is going to be peppered with a bunch of play on words and math terminology. Anyway, let's just dive right into the crux of the matter. Why do some briefs integrate or intersect so easily into our writing while others seem to subtract from our performance? Is there really a common denominator? Is there really a way to make mastering briefs as easy as 1, 2, 3? Well, I'm here to tell you, yes, there is, and I've got a formula that you can count on. The first part of our formula is where psychology meets math. It is a potent equation for habit formation, and what I'm talking about is the fog behavior model. And that states that these three elements must converge at the same moment for a behavior to occur. And those elements are motivation, ability, and prompt. So when we look at those three elements and we put them together and they're happening at the same exact time, it can actually prompt our desired behavior, which our desired behavior is consistently practicing briefs. So the first element we're going to cover is motivation. The first constant that you need to help a brief stick is motivation. And I'm talking particularly about intrinsic motivation. Motivation isn't just a nice to have, it's actually essential in mastering new briefs effectively. And you want to know what amplifies motivation? The answer is immediate utility. So you want to choose to study briefs that you will actually use on a regular basis. So I'm talking about words or phrases that constantly come up, whether you're at work or at school, wherever. The more you need a specific brief, the more motivated you are to learn and use it. It's not just another random set of keystrokes, but it's actually a tool that you see will actually make your life easier. Intrinsic motivation and immediate utility have a reciprocal relationship. Your intrinsic motivation is something that comes from within you. It's based on a genuine interest or enjoyment of the task itself. Okay, so when stenographers have that intrinsic motivation to master briefs, it directly increases the immediate utility and value they get from the mastery process. All right, I'm going to say that one more time. When you have that high intrinsic motivation to master a brief, you are going to see that it directly increases the immediate utility, meaning you are going to master it faster. You're going to see, if you see there's a brief that you need to know, you're like, oh my gosh, I need this in my life. You're going to hear it tomorrow and you're probably going to write it, because the more motivated you are, more likely you're going to use it ASAP. All right. And you're also going to value what you get from that mastery process. And that whole drive is going to fuel your progress. And then, of course, the more you master these high utility outlines, these high frequency words or phrases, due to your intrinsic motivation, you're going to have this positive feedback loop. You're going to see that your competence, it's going to grow, all right? And that's going to further increase your motivation and the utility that you derive from practice. Intrinsic motivation is going to prioritize consistency and relevance when learning outlines. So again, look for outlines that you hear a bunch of times, or look for words or phrases. Those are the stuff that you want to use. Those are the stuff that you want to practice, because it's going to have immediate real-world application. Now, intrinsic motivation also is could give you that whole flow state. And you know, by flow state, what I mean is you catch yourself and you're practicing and you've been practicing for 3 hours and you're like, oh my goodness, where has the time gone? That's flow, all right? And when you have flow, it's going to maximize those benefits that you're seeing in your practice, and especially with the whole retention of brief outlines. So the more you are able to stay in a flow state, which some people debate that there is, I don't know, like a time limit, like you can't be in a flow state for more than 5-6 hours, but I kind of disagree with that. But either way, you want to be in a flow state. So you want to figure out, okay, well, what gives me that flow state? How do I get into that flow state? Flow state is maximized when you are working on things that you are able to apply immediately. Now, when you're motivated to master the new briefs, you are going to just put more focus into drilling and actually practicing them in an effective manner. This is why when you're motivated to practice them, you're going to see how quickly you can recall and use these outlines in the future. So prioritize learning the most relevant and frequently used phrases and words first, okay? That should be at the top of your list. And this could all be summed up by saying, need it, nail it. The briefs you need are the ones that you are going to master quickly. We all come across briefs that are cool to know, but how often are you actually going to use them? I'm going to guess rarely, all right? So I'm going to encourage you to skip the cool to know kind of briefs, and I want you to zero in on the must-haves that directly benefit your everyday writing. This approach multiplies your intrinsic motivation, and it's going to exponentially increase the efficiency of your practice time. The next element on the FOG model is ability. In the context of this model, ability refers to the ease of which a specific behavior can be performed, and so for us that means practice, right? So to ensure that briefs become second nature to you, it's crucial to not only practice them, but to have the right tools for effective practice. So what are these tools? What are these resources? And how do you find them? One useful method is to actually review your transcripts. Basically, that's where you're going to go and use your CAT software so that you can search all of your previous transcripts for occurrences of the word that you wish to brief. So once you find those instances, you can actually save or record these sentences however you want, so that way you can actually practice them in context. You can actually practice the brief in context. This is actually going to make it much easier for you to adapt these things, or I guess adopt these things, these new briefs, into your everyday writing. Now, if going through transcripts sounds a bit tedious, you do have other options. You can construct simple, straightforward sentences that include the brief you're trying to master. And what I mean by simple and straightforward, it's typically a sentence that's not overly complicated and it's containing only essential components like subject, verb, object, whatever. This kind of sentence serves to focus your attention on the brief in question without distractions from complex structures or additional clauses. So in this instance here with what's on the screen, you can see that this person is trying to work on the phrase "I did." Whether you find these sentences from an old transcript or you create them yourself, you can now record these sentences as an audio file, or you can use them for hard copy practice, whether it's hard copy is printed or digital format, whatever, you can do it. I mean, you could even take it a bit further by developing pyramid sentences and making them more complex as you go. The versatility of practicing with custom sentences or a curated word list is immense. Your ability to practice effectively is significantly increased when you have a variety of reliable tools at your disposal. This basically amplifies your ability, making it more likely that you will achieve the desired behavior, which is practicing and mastering briefs. Next is prompt. When it comes to mastering any skill, consistent practice is a must, but it's easy to get sidetracked without reminders or triggers. So consider this, just as a phone notification prompts you to go look at the screen, a well-placed trigger can act as that link between moderate success and true mastery. So having your equipment ready and your practice area nice and tidy serves both as a visual cue and a trigger. And that is what's going to urge you to get started with your practice session. And triggers aren't confined to the physical realm. You can utilize calendar reminders, habit tracking apps, and even an accountability partner for regular check-ins. The ultimate goal is to choose triggers that integrate effortlessly into your daily life and making them so ingrained that ignoring them becomes more laborious than simply following through. The key is to have simple visual or notification reminders set up that prompt immediate action during predetermined practice time. So basically it's something that's going to interrupt your day and say, practice now. That is going to lead to regular consistency. Let's move on to the next variable in our learning equation, spaced repetition. To illustrate this, I want you to think of it like doing sprints in sports. In a sprint, you run really, really fast for a short time and then you rest. In spaced repetition, it's very similar. You focus real hard when you're practicing for a short amount of time and then you take a break. So keeping a steady pace is important, whether you're sprinting or practicing. Basically in sports, you try to keep that same speed so you can do your best. And in practicing Steno, sticking to your planned study and rest times is going to help you remember your briefs, retain it all better. And just like when you're doing a sprint, when you're in an exercise like a CrossFit and then there's a goal, right? You have a goal to finish your sprint in a certain time. That's the same exact way you need to have clear goals for each of your practice sessions. For example, you might want to get the most out of a practice session with a set number of outlines, and you're going to say, here are these outlines that I'm going to practice, here are the sentences that I'm going to practice, and this is how long I'm going to do it for. So you want to set up the whole SMART goals for your sprint. Now, one of the things I have to mention is that spaced repetition is not going to be the same for everyone. You and only you can choose how many study or practice sprints that you want to use or have each day or week, basically based on what you need to learn and how you learn. Keeping that in mind, I have still made an illustration, basically an example to show you what spaced repetition would look like. So yes, everybody's spaced repetition is going to look a little bit different, but no matter what, we all start the same. When you're first learning a brief, you want to start strong. And that means you want to practice it multiple times right away. And that's just so that you can establish a basic level of familiarity. So we're going to call that the first spacing. After that, like on day 2 or day 3, basically, after your initial learning, you want to practice that brief again. This is going to help reinforce your initial understanding, and this is actually when you're starting to commit that brief to your memory. On days 4 through 7, any variation of it, even or days 4, 5, 6, and 7, whatever you want, okay? You want to practice that brief again. And by this time, the brief should start feeling more familiar. But the review is really there to ensure that it's solidified into your memory. After that, you're going to want to increase the interval between your spacings. So that means you're going to continue practicing the brief, but there's going to be increasingly longer spacing. So maybe it could be 2 weeks after the second review, a month after that, 10 days, whatever it is. It's up to you to decide on when to do it, and knowing that each review is going to refresh your memory, and basically it's going to just reinforce those briefs into your long-term memory. Now, there's another way you're going to have some spaced repetition, and this time it's not intentional, which is naturalizing it through work. That's basically when you are on the job or in a dictation and you hear the word and you're like, OMG, I have a brief for it. And sometimes you don't think, OMG, I have a brief for it the first time around, but maybe the second or third time you're like, wait, I have a brief for that. And you keep using it in that dictation or on that job. That means you're naturalizing it through work, and that's probably my favorite part of the whole spaced repetition. Another component for spaced repetition is tracking and triggering. What I mean by that is this is when you set timers or you set appointments with yourself. You plan out your practice session, so you're like, hey, I'm going to practice this set of briefs or this brief. I'm going to make sure I practice this on Tuesday or on the 5th or whatever it is. All of that is going to help you, remind you to practice that brief so that it really becomes part of your long-term memory. And now we are finally at the last portion of our formula, which is the essential R's. Basically, review, revise, and reapply. All of these components are going to help you have briefs that you learn and have them actually stick. So let's sum it all up with the formula. Here we have the formula, and let's break it down. Our first part, the first column, the maps is what I call this, MAPS. You're going to notice when you have your maps and you add it to the essential R's, this is the formula for having success at mastering briefs. Now, I don't know if you could tell already, but I love math. Like, I absolutely love math. I've always loved math. And if you're paying close attention, you'll notice that in the first column, we're actually multiplying the variables. Whereas in the second column, we're adding the variables. Now, there's a major difference, and let me tell you why. In that first set, in our maps, every variable is important. Every variable is crucial, and it's connected to one another. They need to happen. All of them need to happen for it to be effective. Just like when you multiply something by 0, no matter how many things you multiply by 0, the answer becomes 0. Just like in the first column, if any of these variables is 0, then the whole practice, the whole attempt basically fails, all right? So even if you have all the motivation in the world, but you don't have the ability to practice or you don't remember to practice, you're gonna just have a 0. It's not gonna be effective. I mean, it's unlikely to be effective. All right, so those are the first conditions for learning and practicing and having success at mastering these briefs so that they stick. Now, the second column, the essential R's, these are important. I mean, we add them up, they're important for, ongoing improvement and, to really solidify the mastery. But the thing is, they're not all needed, okay? Because you may not have to revise. That could be a 0, and that's okay. Because hey, the brief was good. It was good. It's fitting in with your way of writing, but maybe you just need to review it a bit more. And of course, reapply. The reason why reapply is important is that what that means is if you're not using it, you're going to lose it. So actually using it in different scenarios, such as on a job or in a dictation that you didn't create for yourself, you are going to have much more success at mastering that brief, having it in your long-term memory, which is all we really, really want. Now, if you love this, I'm telling you, you apply it, you're going to see the difference in your writing and in your practice sessions. And if you want a major, major, major change to occur within just a few days, I'm telling you, you are going to want to go to the speed clinic ASAP. What makes the speed clinic work is just what we have covered as well in here, because the phrases that you are going to learn at the speed clinic, you are going to be able to see that immediate utility, because I'm telling you, the phrases that you learn at the speed clinic are everywhere. It doesn't even have to be in a court transcript, just in sentences that you say to one another outside, okay, when you're touching grass. Those kind of phrases, those are what build everyday sentences, and those are what you're going to learn at the speed clinic. So if you're interested in that, we have one coming up, and it's going to be in Miami, Florida, and it's October 11th through the 13th. So if you're excited about it, you want to know more about it, definitely check out stenospeedclinic.com. And if you're unable to attend, I know you want to, but for whatever reason you just can't make it, you can always check out stenokey.com, because at stenokey.com you will be able to learn what you need to learn to get yourself to the next level, and you're going to learn it in a way that makes sense, and you're going to learn it with my help as I will coach you through the way. So definitely check out stenokey.com today.